Everyone, welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be taking our first look at DaVinci Resolve. Uh, we've been using that here for the last few years, and we wanted to share some of the things that we did with how we built our own intro videos for this season of the show. But before we get to that, I want to invite everyone, please, we'd love to have the feedback, the interactivity. So if you have questions, have comments, just let us know and we will get to them here on the show. Also, if you would like to join us on the show and be here live to interact, we have a call-in, so feel free to just go to that URL and somebody from the studio will get you on air. Okay, let's get started. So as I mentioned, this is our first look at DaVinci Resolve, but DaVinci Resolve is an incredibly powerful tool to process audio and video. In addition to being just an editor, it has compositing tools. It has something called Fusion, which allows you to create node-based effects and templates. It has audio processing with all different types of audio control. So it's really an incredibly powerful tool, and there is a version of it that is free and basically almost the same capability as their paid version, which is $300 for the paid version. So definitely, we think it's a worthwhile topic to add to our repertoire of topics that we cover here on Streaming Alchemy. And hopefully you guys will find this interesting too, but just let us know, because we really want to make sure we're talking to what you're interested in. So let me show you a video here, which is running from Resolve, of what it is we're going to go through as we do this show. So here is basically something very similar to what we had, same basic background. And what we did is we took basically this little Resolve logo, and using that, we used Fusion to transform it, put it into the video, and create the different effects with the flashing. So that's something I want to cover exactly how we did that here, so you could come away and use this in a very similar way for your own pre-production. And I think that's probably, the key thing here. A lot of the videos that we have to process have nothing to do with directly the streaming part that we may be tasked with handling. A lot of it is pre-production work, marketing, other things. So this is why this could be a very useful type of tool. So let me jump over to the DaVinci Resolve screen and we'll start to get into a little more detail. Now, since this is our first show talking about Resolve, I want to give a little bit of an introduction to what we have here, so you feel that you have some sense of what's going on. So the place to start, interestingly enough, is right here across the bottom. The way that Resolve is organized is basically around sort of a serial workflow. The media page is one page, and this is where all the assets you bring in, your video, your stills, any types of audio that you want to integrate. That's all goes under the media tab, and you can import it, you can transform it, and you get to basically, you can preview any of these things to look at them to make sure, they look like you want. The next page, sort of these tabs across the bottom, the next page over is called the cut page. And the cut page is basically designed for your fast assembly, where I'm basically taking and pulling in video that I may have recorded and sort of lining it up and making it really easy to get that first basic rough cut, where I have everything in sequence and I get the timing and pacing of my edit correct. And that's really what goes on the cut page. The edit page is where you can do a lot of the more advanced things, where as you add effects, as you add audio, and sort of have these different types of JKL cuts, where you may want to have one audio playing under a different video, all of those types of things. That's all done in the edit page. The next page, which we're going to spend some time in, is the Fusion page. And Fusion is basically a node-based compositor effects generator. And so we'll go into that next, but that is, definitely a page that most people just skip over. The next page over from there is all about color correction. And you have very detailed color correction. DaVinci Resolve, when it first came out, was an incredibly expensive tool that was designed for colorists. So they could take any sort of movie or film or video and color mood it. So you could do all types of different color effects to get exactly the look you wanted. And that's all those tools, and they are incredibly powerful, are all in here. The next tab over is the Fairlight tab. Fairlight is for all the audio. And Fairlight 2 was an incredible, one of the very early sampling systems. Incredibly powerful, used, by, in the earlier days, so in the 80s, it was used as a production tool for manipulating digital audio. And it really was incredibly powerful for that. And then the last one is the Deliver tool. This is basically where you can take and say, how do I render out everything that I've done? What formats do I want that in? And how do I want to compress it, and what codecs do I want to use for the end delivery? So you can see that Resolve really works across a logical workflow with each of these tabs, from ingest, rough cut, finessed cut, color correction, the effects and other types of compositing, then to audio and delivery. So it covers the whole thing. On today's show, we are just going to be taking a look at the Edit tab and the Fusion tab. So to get started with what we did here, I have these two elements I have. I have a background video that I put here, and I have an overlay video. Basically, this is just a PNG, a 16 by 9 PNG with the DaVinci Resolve logo in it. And what I want to do is I want to composite layer 2, video track 2, onto video track 1. And have a clean way to do that, because this is really the key to getting started, is where you start to take layers and composite them. And the way we're going to do that is using Fusion. But before I jump over to Fusion, I just want to very quickly here, there's a couple of things you'll see. The first is this is a very standard audio editing, video editing framework, where I have my audio tracks, and they're all sort of on the bottom part of the screen. I have my video tracks. I can add more video tracks and just layer them up to create exactly the layout I need to start to process and manipulate each of these. When I select any one of these, over here, there is an inspector which gives me controls of doing things like zooms, rotations, cropping, all the things I want. And if there are any effects associated with a clip, you have the ability to manipulate that up here as well. So that is really where I wanted to sort of level set. It should be very familiar to people who have worked with editors, but the power behind this is really impressive. So let's look at exactly what we did to composite this top video, which is really just an image clip, onto this video in the background. And we did that here in Fusion. So let's see. I don't have, let me see if I have a window up here where I could see the comments coming in. So just give me a second, because I don't have boom with Lord Zoom. So yes, we are live. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate that. Give me a second here. All right. So we have Marco. Hi from South Africa. Marco, thank you for joining us live. I definitely appreciate that. We have Eric. Eric saying hello from Paris. Eric, thank you for joining us. Hope all is well, and I appreciate you spending your Friday night with us. So we have JP saying hi. Hope everyone, it's nice to see you again. Also from South Africa, JP, thank you. I appreciate you joining us here. So, okay. So let me dig into this a little bit more now. We've got we're in Fusion now, and as you can see up here, what we've set up in Fusion is this is the final adjusted image. Now, the way Fusion works, this is basically a big scratch pad. All of these elements are just basically, we have the media in, which is the image that came in, and then we have the media out. So the way Fusion works is it takes whatever's on that timeline. If you say, I want to take this element on the timeline and send it to Fusion, what it does is it says, I take that element, feed it into Fusion, process it in Fusion, and then I feed it back to the timeline. So this media in one and media out one are basically that pipe. So let me do the following, because we're gonna break into this so you have a really good sense of what I'm doing here. So if I were to take this media one in, and I were to just point this directly to media out, this is exactly what we have unprocessed by anything. So this is the core first step when you're inside of Fusion, is you basically are taking the video or the asset off the timeline and processing it and then pushing it out into the timeline again. So basically like a plug-in effect. That's how you can think of it. So what we're doing though is we are taking and adding different effects to this to get the composite that we want. So the first effect that we added, and we'll sort of do this one at a time here, is we said we want to transform the video. So let me go and we'll say this is exactly what we have when we did the transformation. So the way this transformation works, if I click on this transform node, is that I can go in and make any adjustments I want. So let me zoom in here a little bit, see if you can see this. So if I come here, I can take and basically move this around and sort of size it to match it up exactly with what I want on the background video. And if I wanted to see, like to get this layout correct, here is something else that you can do. Inside of Fusion, I can just go and say, I just want to add, let me click over here. I just want to add the video that I'm going to composite this over. So we're just going to drop that into Fusion. And this, again, should give you a sense of just how powerful this is. I can drop this into Fusion. Let me zoom this to fit again. And I can say what I actually want to do is I am going to take and push this, see if I can merge these two. Yeah, I'll just take him off and put him here as the output, and I'll merge this in. So now what I've done here is this is the first step that we've done with the composite. I have taken this, done the transformation, and I just put this over a background image. So again, this is the power in this. I added this image in, this video in, so I could lay everything out and get this lined up exactly. And now all I'm doing here is I'm merging these two together. I'm taking the transformed video at the top layer, and I'm doing the merge here in the bottom layer, and I'm sending that out. But what we wanted to do was do a little bit more to this. So again, as you can see, all of these things are nodes. So if I want to, I can turn around and say, I want to now add a drop shadow under this. So I can take, let me sort of unhook this. So I just move this around, and we'll push this in here, and we'll plug this in and sort of do the full thing. So now, if you look, what did I do? I think I may have messed this up. Yeah, I think I put it in the wrong one. Yes. So what I've done here is now I've taken this video, this image, and I've put a small drop shadow, and you can just see that. So if I go up here and I turn this on and off, so let me just turn the drop shadow on and off. You can just see, it just adds that little extra bit of darkness under to give this a little bit of depth. So that's off and that's on. So that was something else that I just added, again, to give it a little bit more realism and help with making this composite happen. So the last thing I wanted, though, if you remember when I played the original video, I have the logo here flashing a bit. So it looks like this is a processor, so it looks like it's working, it's doing something here. And that's something where I added with a flicker node. So how this would work then is I can just go and say, let me take and put this into flicker, and I'm going to put that, and I'm going to put that flicker into the merge. And now, if you look at, as I move this, I'm sort of playing the live video, you can see how the icon on top is now flickering. So if I play at regular speed, you'll see it has that sort of blinking effect here. And this is what I've done with all this. So I've just taken this, if I come back to the node graph, I've taken the video in, or the image in from the timeline. I've transformed it, added a drop shadow. Then I've added flicker to the end of it. And basically, I use these here just as a reference so I could see what I wanted. But what I really want to do now is I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to move this right to out. So now what I've done here is I have this straight pipeline of asset in, transformation, drop shadow, flicker control, and push that back onto the timeline. So we'll get rid of these because we don't need these here. So that is basically how you can create these types of composited effects inside of Resolve. Now, if I go back to the edit, you can see all of this is here exactly the way I had it. And you can see the drop shadow, the flicker, and everything else. And that's, now we just composited that over the same video here, but we did it on the timeline. So that means if I had different looks or different things, but with the same basic layout, I could replace the video pretty easily and just have this come in here. But that was a lot of work. So if I go back in, Fusion gives us a couple of ways to make this simple. But the first one it does is it says you can take all the functionality that you used inside of Fusion here. And so you can just grab this and say, what I want to do is I want to save it as a macro. So you can go here and you can say, I want to create a macro. Now, when you get this, it's sort of like, whoa, what just happened? Every one of these nodes inside of Fusion has variables that you can set up and adjust. So like the flicker is, how do you want the flicker to look? How often do you want it to flicker? How intense do you want it? The transformation clearly has a lot of variables to how I want to position things. Drop shadow as well. All of those elements here, all of those controls are highlighted here. So this is basically, if you sort of follow exactly what we had, this is basically everything for the video as it came in. And then we do the transformation, the drop shadow, and the flicker. And each of these, if you look, these are all the controls that I have available to me in each of these nodes. And so that's part of it. We are just going through this at a very high level to get you comfortable with the concept of building these node-based flows. But all of these are the elements that you can control. And what this lets you do is it says, if you want to create a macro with this, this now will let you say, which controls do you want to make visible in the macro? So somebody isn't going to be presented with 150 different control points. You can turn around and say, these are the 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 controls I want to make visible. So we can save those and pick what we want. So in this case, say, the only thing I really want to do is for the flicker, I want to be able to come back and say, I want to say, okay, what type of flicker, how smooth do we want it, how random do we want it, and what's our initial seed. So that's what we want. So we pick those, and I can say close, and it says, do you want to save this as a macro? Actually, let me change the name, so we'll just make it into something. So we'll say demo, SA demo. So we put this here. And when I close this, it says save the changes. So now what this is doing is creating a file that's called a setting file. And the setting file packs all this stuff together. It's basically a way that Resolve and Fusion store all this. So I place this here, and this is an SA demo setting. So now, if I wanted to use this in the future, here is how that would happen. So let me go, and I'm going to just create a new timeline so we can start to work. Let me go back to the edit page. So I'll create a new timeline here, and we'll just call this demo. And on this new timeline, we're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to put, this is our background video, and we're going to put a logo in front of it. So, okay, so we're just going to use, this DaVinci Resolve. We'll do this exactly the same thing as we did before. And let's see, we'll spread this out to about there. That's about right. So now, if I put this here, if I click on this and I go into Fusion, I now have nothing here. But if I want to make this change happen, what I can do is I can say, I want to add a node. And now this node that we set up is SA demo. So we set this up. So if I come here and say, I want to add that node, let me take this out. I didn't need to do it that way. So let me get rid of this. And if I say SA demo is now the first node, put this into here. It looks like I screwed something up. But if let me just do this with something that I didn't set up as the demo here because I did this pretty quickly. So if I come in here and say, let me just add SA place logo, and we add that here. Now, if I come here and drag this into SA place logo, and I drag this out to media out, you now see that that asset is correctly placed. And if I go back to the edit window, you can now see that this was done, exactly as I wanted to have laid out. So that should give you a very clear view of how this would actually set up. And that's just now as a macro. I don't have to know all of the different steps. This is repeatable. So that's one way to do this. But another thing that you can do is I can take now, if I'm using this time and again, I can actually take and create this as an effect that I just apply without going into Fusion at all. So the way that we do that, again, coming back into Fusion, if I open up the timeline here, which is, I believe this is it. So this has our entire Fusion script here. If I take and select this section in the middle, dropping the media in and the media out, and saying, I just want to use this as an effect on my timeline, I can go and say, okay, save this as a macro. Oh, let me do this. Save this as a macro and create a macro. But instead of putting it in the macro commands for Fusion, there's another place that we can save this. So let me just add a few more controls so we can we get the transform. So do this in Flickr. So add a few more controls here just so we can show at the end the flicker type, the range, the speed, the smoothness. So if I save this here, I can turn around and say, I want to do this SA demo. But when I save this, as opposed to saying I want to save it in the Fusion macros folder, there is a place in Fusion called the templates. So if I just click up here on Fusion, scroll down to templates, I wanted to use this in my edit section. So I go edit and I save it as an effects. Now you can create your own directory here. So I just created a folder called Alchemy. And here is where I can place this. So if I save this here now, one of the things you'll see if I go back to edit is I now could come up here and go to effects. These are my effects over here. Go to Alchemy. And you now see I have SA demo sitting here as one of my effects. So how would this work? Let me, again, I'll just, for demo purposes here, this is our timeline. So I'm going to take and delete everything I have here. So now we're starting with a fresh timeline. So just like before, if I wanted to, I can put my video on the bottom. And let's say, what do we want to use? We want to use, okay, we're going to use this Google logo here. So this will drag that out a bit. Now, clearly, that is not the composite we want. But if I go and say, apply this logo, this effect to this logo, it now is placed exactly what we want, and all of that functionality is here. So this now has taken it from something where it was very complex, then down to just a macro that I could use to embed in Fusion, then down to this is just an effect that I can have listed here on the side of my edit panel and apply it whenever I want. So this was sort of a very high level, but hopefully it has gotten you a step into looking at Resolve and not just avoiding the Fusion thing, not just using it for cut edits, but really to start to look at it as a tool you can use to create a lot of the assets that go into your productions. So let's see if we have any more, let's see, do we have any more comments over here? So Marco's saying it reminds him a bit of Avid DS. Yeah, so Avid had a lot of early capabilities, and you know, it was discontinued. And in fact, I'm not sure. I had heard that Avid they were sold, and now they are either up for sale or, you know, being somehow liquidated, or their assets. I could be wrong with that, but I just read that somewhere. So yeah, it's a shame because Avid has had some great products. And, you know, the things that, you know, a node-based workflow, I mean, which is part of what Marco is talking about, that they had, having that ability inside an editor makes life so much easier because it saves what would traditionally be called round tripping. So if I wanted to do something, say with Premiere and After Effects, the having to take myself out of my editor, go into something else, do the work there, and then take the result of that and send that back into my editor, that is done very elegantly inside of Resolve, where it basically says, if you activate Fusion on a clip inside of the editor, it does that round tripping for you. That thing where media in one and media out one, that is the round tripping. And then it just says, okay, now do what you want in the middle. And I'll just take and push that back into the timeline when you're done. So definitely a very, very powerful tool for doing that type of framework. While we are still going here, let me just show you something else that you can do, because I sort of touched on it with a few things. And that is, you can actually create much more sophisticated composites in Fusion. And so this is something that we were doing just to sort of take a look at how we can put together, so I'll sort of do this over here. So this is something that I did that basically has this video here. And what we're saying is, I want to take whatever video I have on this video line, and I want to insert it into a monitor, add a little bit of a glow and make it fit. But also recognize that this monitor is part of a moving shot. So we're also doing tracking inside of here. So again, this is that next level of capabilities that you have. And you know, if you go in here and you sort of look at this now, it's the same basic model we're using. We're taking something in, we're adding a glow. We are taking a second video in. So that's the other thing here. When I put that one video on the timeline, I'm actually adding a second video and building a composite. So say you had a show intro that you wanted to use all the time, which had, you know, common elements, but you just wanted to change a few things. This is something you could do where you just say, okay, I'm just going to put clips and do effects on top of those clips, and they'll composite automatically for each step of a program intro I want to do. So you get exactly that, even with sophisticated things like image tracking, where it's placing that video inside the monitor as things move. So again, a very powerful framework, even for very, very sophisticated things. All right, so let me see, do we have any other comments or questions here? So, okay, I think we're good. So why don't we wrap this, and we can jump now into our post-show hangout, and we can talk about anything you want. So if you can join me, we'll be there. We'll be up in a minute. If not, thank you for taking the time to watch this first part of the show, and we'll see you next week. All right, everyone. Thank you for hanging out for the post show here. This was something that, as we were looking for what we wanted to cover this season, we were thinking more broadly about what are all the different components that go into, the production workflow space, and what are the different switchers that people are most commonly using. So that's part of why you're seeing things around Resolve getting introduced on this show, and also things around the TriCaster in addition to vMix. We're trying to sort of cover things more broadly, but please, we're always interested in everyone's feedback out there to, see what makes the most sense for all of you and for the types of productions you're doing as well. So what really inspired us doing this was we looked at the work that we had when we were putting all the opening elements together for this season. And we had started out sort of in the After Effects space, and we're building that. It was really funny because, like I said, we've been using Resolve for a long time, but this made me dig into Fusion, which is something I sort of only touched on for some simple things, and said, okay, how can we actually do this all in a single, in the single app with Resolve? And it got us, we were so impressed by how streamlined that workflow was that we said, okay, this is going to be something we'll definitely be including on our show for this season. So if there were other topics around there that you would like us to cover in the Resolve or in the sort of pre-production area, let us know, and we'll fold those in. But so what else was there? The second thing that we put together, which I just showed at the end of the video, at the end of the live stream, was all around taking and building something more complex. I think that's important too. Resolve, even if you're not using it for pure compositing, things like tracking, where you want to do something inside of another video, those things can be great as well. So Marco's just saying, your channel has been a great resource for me. Just wanted to drop in and say thanks. Marco, I absolutely appreciate everybody that's a part of this community. And I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it. This is a great pleasure for me to get to spend time on Fridays with everyone. And I really missed it while we were on the longer than expected hiatus at the beginning of the year. But Marco, thank you very much. And I hopefully, this is something that people do find useful. And that's why we're always soliciting feedback. We want to make sure we're covering what you're focused on. So in the second video, I didn't really get into just how complex things with Fusion can be. But when you get your head around the node-based approach, it really is a fairly straightforward way to think about what you're doing. You're taking something in and then applying a series of transformations. Some of those can be things that you do sort of in, a linear sequence. So each one is happening at, at basically one after the other. So the output of, your first effect, your first node, is the input to your next node. In others, you can do things that are sort of more in parallel, where you say, I take one output and feed it into multiple nodes and do things that move across that way, where you could be doing different types of processing. That is really, that logical mindset, when you get into that and then look at Fusion again, I think it can make things so much easier for you in terms of how you break up the types of things you need to do in your video edits. So, so Marco is coming in saying, would love to see a demo on your colon solution. Have been having a few issues. Okay, this is something we were actually talking about. So we have a new single channel product called Colon One that is coming out this month. So we were planning on doing a demo of that, but I can sort of include a little bit of the live to air product in that and talk about specifically how that would integrate with vMix and with TriCaster. So thank you, Margaret. That's something we definitely we're interested in doing. So I think you've locked in our show for next week. So thank you for that. We're always looking for that type of feedback. But yeah, so I think this is when I've talked in the past. So this is funny because we talked multiple times about where a lot of these capabilities are sort of pushing the live streaming market. When you think of the ability to do this stuff inside an editor, imagine now if the processing was sufficiently powerful to do this live. If I could turn around and have text that would just cut me out and move behind me as I did a shot, things of that sort, where you could change the color of my shirt or adjust the background dynamically without green screen, without other things. That's really where a lot of this is heading. So when you look at what's possible in programs like Resolve, you get a really clear sense of what's going to be possible. I don't know whether it's 3 years or 5 years from now in the live space. We can start to look at these things as a precursor where, it's just waiting for the processing power. But that's some of the really cool stuff that I think we'll be seeing in our sphere very shortly. The easier stuff first and then the more compute intensive stuff later. But this is all something that I think is coming. And when you think of adding nodes to something live, where I could sit there and go, yeah, I can actually have things that are triggered with nodal workflows, all as mini flows without having to write scripting for all this stuff. Again, a very, very powerful way to look at things. So it's really an encapsulated form of scripting, where the only thing you pass around is video or audio, and all the individual functions are sort of encapsulated to take the video in, do something to it, and put video out, or take audio and put audio out. So a very cool way to think of scripting now as well. So, all right. So I don't know if we have any other comments or questions that anybody has here. We can stick around because I know we have a bit of a delay between when I'm talking and you're seeing it in the stream. But get your questions in now if you have anything else. And based on Marco's feedback, I think we will do a show next week on Colon One and integration with vMix and TriCaster. So hopefully that will get into some of the stuff that Marco was asking about here. So I think we are probably in a position to call it a wrap for this week. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you making time for the hangout as well. And I'll see you all next week. Take care.